I have a question for you that might sound a little strange.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you hear the words enlightenment or awakening, what's the immediate image that pops into your head? Be honest.
Oh, that's easy. It's the standard movie poster version, right?
Like a monk on a mountaintop.
Monk on a misty mountaintop, yeah. Or some, sudden thunderbolt moment where the clouds part and the universe finally makes sense.
Right, it's cinematic. But what if I told you that real awakening might actually be kind of boring?
Boring.
Yeah.
That is a risky way to open a deep dive. Usually we try to promise excitement.
I know, but stick with me. I mean, boring in a mechanical sense. What if it's not a mystical high, but just a stable, permanent, and frankly unexciting shift in how your brain works?
Ah, okay. Now I'm with you.
Yeah.
Because the research we're looking at today claims exactly that.
We are doing a deep dive into a purely neurostructural account of awakening.
And neurostructural is the key word there. What's so fascinating about these sources is they completely strip away the spiritual metaphors. There's no energy, no vibrations,
No soul in this text.
none. It's all about brain networks.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, two big players. The default mode network, or DMN,
Okay.
and the reticular activating system, or RAS.
Which I have to say sounds a lot less romantic than opening your third eye. It sounds like we're diagnosing a car engine.
It does, but it's way more precise. The mission for this deep dive is to demystify the difference between a temporary spiritual high and a permanent, stable baseline of functioning.
And to do that, you said we have to start with one critical distinction.
The most critical one, if you take one thing away from the first few minutes, it should be this: the difference between a state and a trait.
Okay, let's unpack that. State versus trait.
They sound similar, but in this context, they're completely different. Think of a state as something that's condition dependent.
Meaning?
It relies on specific circumstances to exist. It's a temporary weather pattern.
Like the way you feel after a really good massage?
That's a perfect analogy. Or maybe you're at a meditation retreat. You feel calm, clear, maybe even blissful. But that feeling is fragile.
It depends on the quiet room and the scented candles.
Exactly. If a fire alarm goes off or someone cuts you off in traffic 5 minutes later, poof, the state collapses instantly. It's House of Cards.
Right, don't sneeze.
Precisely. Now, a trait is different. A trait is a stable baseline. It requires zero special conditions to maintain.
So it's woven into the operating system.
Yes, and the source material really emphasizes this. A trait is actually harder to lose than to keep.
So if you have this trait, you could be doing your taxes or stuck in traffic, and that baseline just holds.
Correct. It's fully compatible with ordinary life. The source argues that a massive amount of confusion comes from people mistaking a high-quality state for a permanent trait. They chase that massage feeling forever.
But structurally, they're chasing the wrong thing.
They're chasing the weather instead of changing the climate.
This reminds me of that classic goal people talk about, silencing the mind. That's the benchmark, isn't it? If I'm awakened, my mind should be empty.
And that is probably the biggest myth this research just completely busts.
Let's get into that. Because I definitely thought the point was to turn off the voice in your head.
Right. If I'm still worrying about my grocery list, how can I be awakened?
Exactly.
Well, according to this model, turning off thought is physiologically impossible. And frankly, you wouldn't want to. The source is clear. Thought generation never stops.
Never. Even for the guy who's been meditating in a cave for 30 years.
Never. Let's just look at the biology for a second. The default mode network, the DMN, that's the part of your brain that generates narrative, memory, planning.
The storyteller.
The storyteller. It's always on. Remembering breakfast, worrying about tomorrow. That network keeps firing, even in a so-called awakened brain.
So when people say my mind stopped, what's actually happening? Are they just lying?
No, not at all. They're describing their subjective experience, not the biological reality. And this is where the text introduces a really cool formula to explain it.
Uh-oh, math. You were supposed to warn me.
It's a simple one, I promise, but it changes everything. Subjective salience equals DMN multiplied by RAS.
Okay, subjective salience equals DMN times RAS. We know DMN is the storyteller. What's subjective salience?
It's a fancy term for how much does this matter to me? How sticky is a thought? How much does it grab your attention?
Got it. And the RAS?
The RAS is the reticular activating system. Think of it as the brain's volume knob for urgency. It handles bodily arousal, threat detection. It's the bouncer at the club deciding who gets in.
So the DMN creates the thought, like, I forgot to pay the electric bill. And the RAS decides how loud and panicky that thought feels.
You've got it. In the awakened trait, the DMN is still producing thoughts, the story is running, but the RAS amplification is incredibly weak.
So the thoughts are there, but they don't, grab you by the throat.
Exactly. Imagine a radio in your room. Normally it's on volume 10.
Hmm.
Every song, every ad, you can't ignore it. It's shaking the walls.
That sounds like my brain at 3 in the morning.
Right. Now, in the awakened trait, the radio is still on. The DMN signal is the same. But the volume knob, the RAS, is turned down to 1.
It's just background noise.
Functionally inaudible. The text calls it non-directive. The thought, I forgot the bill, it exists, but it has no hook. It doesn't trigger a cortisol spike. So, subjectively, you look at your experience and say, my mind is silent.
But neurologically, the thoughts just lost their stickiness. That's a huge distinction.
It is. It's not about stopping the signal. It's about breaking the speaker system.
And this leads us to the idea of the self, doesn't it?
Directly. Because if thoughts are just background noise, who is the I that's supposedly listening to them?
The million-dollar question. So what is the self in this model?
It's not a ghost in the machine. The source calls it a self-package.
A package deal. Okay, what's in the box?
As a coupling of those two systems we just talked about.
Yeah.
The self is what happens when the DMN's story, your identity, your history, gets glued together with the RAS's high arousal urgency.
So I am basically a story that feels really, really urgent.
That is a very efficient way to put it. A memory without emotion is just data. But a memory with high arousal, that's me. That's my trauma or my victory.
The self is that emotional glue. So if the RAS amplification drops, what happens to the self? Does it die? Do you become a zombie?
That's a common fear, but no.
Ah.
The text is very clear. In the trait form of awakening, the self-package does not disappear. If it did, you'd be totally dysfunctional.
Right. You wouldn't know your own name. You'd be very hard to employ.
Exactly. What happens is the self ceases to be the foreground. It moves from the center of the stage to the wings.
It's still there if you need it.
Right. It activates only when functionally required, like for a job interview or to dodge a car. And then, crucially, it recedes again.
So it's like a tool in a toolbox. You don't walk around clutching a hammer all day. You just take it out when you need it.
Perfect. And because it's not constantly amplified, you get this subjective sense of nothing being there. But that nothing is just the absence of excess amplification. It's not a void, it's just quiet.
This all sounds great. I mean, it sounds peaceful, but it makes me wonder about how most of us try to get there. We do these intense 10-day retreats. We try to force the quiet.
And that brings us to what's probably the most controversial point in this research. The idea that those intense techniques can actually hurt your progress. The source material calls it the gap problem.
The gap problem. Just the name sounds frustrating.
It is, and you probably felt it. Ever go on a really relaxing vacation, feel amazing, and then the first day back at work feels 10 times worse than before you left?
Oh, yeah. The post-vacation blues. You walk in the office and everything feels louder and more annoying.
That's the mechanism. Here's the trap. Intense techniques usually modulate states, not the baseline. So, step 1, you force your brain into a deep, low-noise state. Artificial quiet. You feel great.
Okay.
Step 2, you return to ordinary life. Step 3, the self-package reactivates at full strength.
And wham, the contrast just hits you like a truck.
The contrast is brutal.
Yeah.
And that contrast creates suffering. You feel lost, you crave the state you just lost, and the DMN spins a new story. I lost it, or I'm not good enough, or I need to meditate harder.
So the suffering comes from the size of the gap between your artificial high and your actual baseline.
Exactly. The source calls this the high-risk sequence. You keep a strong self, force these deep states, and you're basically just stretching a rubber band until it snaps back in your face.
Ouch. That explains that spiritual roller coaster so many people talk about.
It's structural instability. You're actually destabilizing the system.
So if we're not supposed to force these deep states, how does real change happen? How do we get the trait without the gap? We can't just sit on the couch eating chips and hope for it, right?
Well, maybe not the chips part. But the solution proposed here is completely counterintuitive for our no pain, no gain culture. It's low intensity over long duration.
Low intensity. That doesn't sound very heroic. It's not something I can brag about on social media. Guess what, guys? I meditated really inefficiently today.
It isn't, and that's the whole point. For the stable sequence to happen, the self-package has to weaken gradually. You want the baseline noise to reduce without creating that sharp, painful contrast.
You're trying to sneak the change past your own ego.
In a way, yes. Think about it. If you do something with high intensity, a grueling retreat where you're straining for enlightenment, What does that do to the
Well,
RAS?
if the RAS is about urgency and threat, straining probably lights it up. It's screaming, something big is happening here.
Exactly. It triggers arousal. And when the RAS lights up, the DMN kicks in to create a story about it.
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm having a breakthrough. I'm becoming so spiritual. It actually reinforces the self.
That is the ultimate irony. Trying hard validates the very thing you're trying to get rid of. It's like trying to smooth out water with a flat iron.
Perfect analogy. You're just making more waves. But low intensity. It flies under the radar. It doesn't trigger arousal. It leaves no trace for the ego to grab onto.
So the brain is changing, neuroplasticity is happening, but the DMN doesn't notice enough to build a story around it.
The goal is structural change without narrative capture. You don't want the ego to claim the victory. Because if the ego claims it, you haven't shifted the baseline. You've just, decorated the prison cell.
This explains something else in the text that I found hilarious. It said that some of the most successfully awakened people did it by accident.
The accidental awakened. Yes, it's a fascinating part of the data.
How does one accidentally become enlightened? Whoops, I slipped and fell into nirvana.
It makes perfect sense in this model. The source suggests these were people who had sustained non-evaluative habits over years. Maybe they were gardeners or long-distance runners.
People in flow states who weren't making a big deal about it.
Exactly. They weren't trying to be spiritual. They had no goal of awakening. And because there was no goal, there was no seeking energy to fuel that DMN RAS loop. They weren't checking every 5 minutes to see if they were enlightened yet.
The ultimate watched pot never boils scenario.
The text calls it conditioned fulfillment. They didn't attain a prize. They simply fulfilled the biological conditions for the DMN and RAS to uncouple. They spent decades in a state of low-stakes attention, and eventually the brain just went, okay, I guess we don't need this high alert system anymore.
That is wildly refreshing. It kind of takes the pressure off, doesn't it? You don't need a cave in the Himalayas. You just need a garden and maybe 20 years of patience.
It shifts the whole paradigm from enlightenment as an event to enlightenment as hygiene. You just keep things clean and the biology handles the rest.
So let's bring this home. We've covered a lot of ground. What does this all mean for someone listening right now who might just want a bit more peace?
Well, the big picture here is that we need to stop treating our peace of mind as a high-stakes achievement.
Stop trying to win at meditation.
Right. All that urgency. I need to fix myself. I need to kill my ego. That's just the RAS firing up, which makes the self stronger. You're adding fuel to the fire.
So the harder you fight the noise, the louder it gets.
Exactly. The takeaway is to lean into low-stakes consistency. It's not about the explosion of insight. It's about the gradual, boring reduction of friction.
And remembering that silence isn't an empty head, it's just turning the volume down so you can actually hear the world without the constant commentary.
It's about being functional in life, not escaping from it. It's about resilience, not escapism.
I love that. So quick recap. Awakening is a biological trait, not a mood. Your thoughts aren't going to stop, so don't try to kill them. Just focus on lowering the volume, the RAS urgency, and maybe trying to force a huge breakthrough is the very thing holding you back.
Sometimes the most profound changes are the ones that happen when you stop looking for them.
Which leaves us with a final thought, I guess. We said the self is basically bodily arousal plus a story, urgency plus a memory.
Right, that's the package.
So if that's true, maybe the moment you stop treating your own peace of mind as a high-stakes achievement, the moment you start making it a big deal, you've already taken the biggest step toward it.
Because if there's no urgency,
There's no self to stand in your way, something to think about while you're doing the dishes today. Just don't try too hard. Thanks for diving deep with us.
a pleasure, as always.